Hey guys and welcome. Sorry if the video looks weird. It seems like there's a glare, but trying to figure out a setup truly is a gift that keeps on giving, so just bear with me. But did you hear that? Due to the nature of the channel, I've been watching a lot of movies. Yes, I know. What a shocking revelation. In other news, the earth is round. And while most of what I watch ends up falling into the, yeah, that was alright category, and quite a few end up in the what a pile of garbage category, some features leave me speechless, and in a good way. Although those movies are few and far in between, I always get so excited to talk about them on here, to see if they resonate with you in the same way. One thing is for sure, they will make you uncomfortable and will force you to ask yourself the same questions the protagonists of these movies were also faced with. And your own answers may just surprise you, like my answers surprised me. And the first movie I wanted to talk about is called Angst. Angst was released in 1983, directed by Gerald Cargill, and it remains one of the most punishingly intimate portrays of violence ever committed to film. And I have to admit that the first time I approached the movie, I turned it off within the first 10 minutes, and not even because of how graphic, violent, what have you it was, but because it was so boring. Which obviously doesn't bode well for the channel, because in order to review movies, I have to watch them. So, a month later, I decided to be once again persuaded by the incredibly high ratings and told myself that I would give it a proper shot. And oh my goodness, it's every bit as good as everyone, meaning the 12 people that watched it, said it is. So, what's Angst about? The film locks itself to the perspective of a man freshly released from prison, and what follows is less a plot than a headspace, and a bad one at that. It's also loosely based on a true story, but gosh, I guess at this point we could say that about so many movies that depict violence. Calling it a hard watch feels lazy, but it's accurate. Still, difficulty alone doesn't make a film worthwhile, but Angst was one of very few movies which made me physically recoil. It's a very raw and visceral portrayal of a very troubled mind, the mind of someone who just left prison and is literally itching to hurt another human being. No one is safe, there is no type of victim he's going after, he just wants to annihilate. And the protagonist doesn't explain it away with trauma flashback or pop psychology. So, what happens when violence is shown as compulsive, banal, and purposeless? And the answer, turns out, is nauseating clarity. Zbigniew Rybczynski's camera work is relentless. It floats, stalks, presses in too close, and sometimes it seems to hover inches behind the protagonist's skull, as if the lens itself is infected with his thoughts. There's a queasy elegance to the movement, a sense that the camera isn't observing events as much as participating in them. Okay, it's hard to explain, but the camera work in this movie truly is a work of art. It's super erratic, frenzied, and really reflects the killer's state of mind. And look, it's coming from someone who has never filmed anything, so you gotta believe me. By tethering us so tightly to the killer's perspective, I was wondering what the movie was really trying to do. Are we being asked to empathize, to understand, or just to endure? And the director never clarifies, and that ambiguity is really part of the design of the movie. The internal monologue delivered in these fragmented, obsessive bursts is another way of showing the killer's mind to the audience. But contrary to what we are often presented with, this killer's thoughts aren't insightful. They're repetitive, crude, and circular. Hunger, control, resentment, fear, desire, over and over again. This is not the seductive eloquence of Hannibal Lecter decades later. This is a man whose inner life is as ugly as his actions, stripped of poetry. Which brings us to one of the film's central ethical provocations. Does showing the mind of a violent person risk humanizing them too much? Or does refusing to show it risk turning them into something falsely monstrous? And this movie chose the former. I believe the film succeeds precisely because it doesn't make the killer interesting in a flattering way. And personally, I was elated to see a killer who resembles what most people who commit such crimes are really like. They have no charisma. They're full of obsession and compulsion, grinding forward without thinking about the consequence of their actions. It would be interesting to show this movie to people who romanticize serial killers, those who believe they have a magneticism to them, are misunderstood, or that they would consider their loyal fans special and spare them. And I don't mean to come after everyone who enjoys true crime. I enjoy true crime. Rather, those who fabricate a story in their mind in which the perpetrator is a misunderstood, gentle, hurt individual. Speaking of which, more on that in the third movie I'll be talking about. And, of course, murder is not a victimless crime, so we are inevitably introduced to the unlucky family, which has to grapple with the fact that the intruder in their house is not to be reasoned with. I think Angst did an exceptional job of creating a villain so overcome by his compulsion. All of his other traits take the backseat. And there's also a grim irony running beneath the film, though it's easy to miss on the first viewing. The killer is obsessed with control, yet he's incredibly incompetent. The film seems to suggest that violence is not an expression of strength, but a confession of weakness. Compared to later serial killer films, many of which flirt dangerously with glamorization, Angst feels refreshing. It's hard to believe it was made back in 1983, as it almost predicted how enamored people would be with serial killers. Or maybe the exact opposite. It wouldn't have been able to fathom what a big part of our current entertainment true crime is. As a side note, did you guys know some true crime YouTubers / podcasters go on tour? No, seriously. I understand the hustle, but I couldn't imagine being one of those families whose cases get brought up during the tour. I mean, I think I'd be incredibly offended if the worst day of my life was the entertainment of the day for women drinking wine, playing detective, but okay. Anyway, tangent over. It's a great movie. 2 thumbs up. The next movie I wanted to talk about is called 7 Days. The movie tells the story of a dilemma I think we've all thought or talked about at some point. What would you do, or what would you want to do if someone tortured and killed your loved one? And depending on the person, I imagine some would say that they'd leave it in the hands of the justice system, and others would be eager to proclaim that they'd take law into their own hands and do the worst things imaginable to the perpetrator. Do everything in their power to make them suffer in hopes of avenging the person that was hurt, to have them feel the pain and understand how they had no right to do what they did. But at the end of the day, we know that's all talk, and nobody really knows what would happen if it actually came down to it. But 7 Days attempts to explore what the reality of actually catching and having the perpetrator at your disposal would be like. The movie was released quietly in 2010, and this Quebecois feature explores the mind of a father whose daughter was assaulted and killed on her way to school. The perpetrator swiftly caught, but understandably, the father's anger and hatred are impossible to contain, so he devised a plan to get his hands on the killer and be with him one-on-one for 7 days. The central question of what would you do and do you still stand by that gets asked over and over again. And I think it's a great study of how loaded that question really is. Despite hatred for the monster who committed these atrocities, at what point do you say they've suffered enough? Do you at any point feel good about the pain and torture you're inflicting on them? And does it make the pain any more bearable? The director did an incredible job of conveying just how complex of a situation this is, how impossible these questions to answer. And although I'd love to talk about it more, it would inevitably end with me spoiling the movie in one way or another, and this one needs to be experienced. The final scene was perfect. It was a perfect ending to the film, and it made it so much more powerful. It just really deserves a lot more recognition. And last, but definitely not least, is a movie called Red Rooms. Watched it on one of your guys' recommendations, and once again, I was really impressed by how different this movie was from everything I've seen so far. And although I've touched on the topic of glamorization of serial killers ad nauseum, this movie never really gives you a clear answer as to what it's trying to say. And throughout the whole movie, up until the last few scenes, I was questioning what the protagonist's motives really were. Okay, but let's backtrack a bit. Red Rooms is another Canadian movie on this list, and it came out in 2019. The movie follows a model, Kellyanne, who seems obsessed with a serial killer. So obsessed that, despite having a great career, she's ready to throw it all away in order to get closer to him. However, she's not doing it in the way we're used to seeing. There's no love letters, romanticizing the killer's actions, or fawning over him. As a matter of fact, we don't really know why she shows up to his trial every day and what her stance on his actions really is. Does she think he's innocent? Maybe she knows more than she's letting on. We see her put a lot of effort into following the case, but her motive remains a mystery. If you're looking for a slasher or a movie which displays brutality, Red Rooms is not it. The movie focuses on the protagonist's actions, with no inner monologue, no explanations, and no violence shown. It was enough to keep my interest throughout the movie, as there were so many hints left for the viewer, so that the audience can decide what Kellyanne really wanted out of this whole ordeal. Deciphering which wasn't easy, as she was very analytical, calculated, and she was quite an isolated individual. As the audience, we are also thrown some curveballs, which make you double guess yourself, change your mind about who you really think Kellyanne is, as well as ask yourself if what she does at the end is an act of mercy or the most evil thing a person could do. That's it. I'm not saying anything anymore. Certainly worth a watch. It's always interesting to see a different take on a topic which has been covered every which way. And on that note, thank you so much for watching. Have you seen any of my today's picks? And if so, I would love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoy the video, please like and or subscribe. As always, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!